You have 16 waking hours today, and if you're honest about how you spend them, a significant portion goes to things that feel urgent, scheduled, and relentless. Meetings, screens, deadlines, commutes, the sense that you are always slightly behind, always catching up, always moving toward the next thing. You call this modern life. But there's a question almost nobody asks. What did humans do before any of this existed? Not in ancient Rome, not in medieval Europe, before cities, before farming, before calendars. What did your ancestors actually do with a day? The answer is stranger than you expect, and it will make you look at your own exhaustion in a completely different way. For the vast majority of human existence, roughly 95% of the time our species has been on Earth, people lived as hunter-gatherers, small bands of between 20 and 50 individuals, moving across landscapes, following animals and seasons and the slow rhythms of the natural world. No agriculture, no permanent structures, no possessions beyond what you could carry. And here's what researchers have found when they study the handful of hunter-gatherer societies that persisted into the modern era. These people did not work very much. Anthropologist Marshall Salins spent years analyzing studies of groups like the Kungsan of southern Africa and the Hadza of Tanzania, and what he found shook the foundations of how we think about primitive life. He called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society, not because they had wealth in any material sense, but because they had something modern humans have almost entirely lost: time. The Kungsan, he found, spent between 3 and 5 hours per day on subsistence activities, hunting, gathering, preparing food. The rest of the day was theirs, and they used it in ways that would look to modern eyes almost scandalously unproductive. They rested, they talked, they told stories, they played with children, they sat in groups and did nothing in particular. They slept, and not just at night. Anthropologist David Sampson has studied sleep across cultures and species, and his research suggests that early humans likely slept in 2 phases, with a period of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night, which was used for reflection, conversation, and what might be called communal dreaming, sharing visions and thoughts in the darkness with the people closest to you. The day itself was structured not by clocks or tasks, but by light, temperature, and hunger. You moved when it made sense to move. You stopped when it made sense to stop. This is not laziness. This is the original human schedule. Think about what a typical day might actually have looked like. You wake near dawn, not from an alarm, but from light and birdsong. Your group breaks camp or stirs from sleep in a loose, unhurried way. There is no morning rush. There is no inbox. Some of the men may go hunting, but not every day, and not all of them. Some of the women gather plant foods within a few miles of camp, but even this is not experienced the way we experience work. Primatologist Richard Wrangham, who spent decades studying the evolution of human behavior, describes early foraging as deeply social, done in groups, accompanied by conversation, interspersed with rest. You walk, you look, you find something. You eat some of it right there. You bring some back. By midday, when the heat peaks in the African savanna, where much of our evolution took place, activity slows dramatically. This is not a cultural choice. It is a biological one. Your body is calibrated for it. The post-lunch dip in alertness that you fight every afternoon at your desk is not a flaw in your design. It is a remnant of a world where you were supposed to rest when the sun was highest, where lying in the shade with your family was not a waste of time, but the natural rhythm of being human. The afternoon brings more activity, perhaps more foraging, perhaps moving to a new location, perhaps tending to tools or preparing food, but none of this is conducted in isolation. There are no cubicles in a hunter-gatherer band. There are no headphones blocking out the world. Everything is done in the presence of other people, accompanied by the kind of low-level social interaction that anthropologists call grooming talk, the endless, easy, mostly purposeless conversation that binds human groups together. This is where gossip was born, not as a vice, but as a social technology. Evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar spent years studying why human language evolved in the first place. His conclusion was that language did not develop primarily for exchanging information. It developed for social bonding, for talking about other people, for maintaining the web of relationships that kept small groups cohesive and safe. The conversations your ancestors had around the fire at the end of the day were not idle chatter. They were the glue that held society together. And the stories told in those conversations, and the myths, the warnings, the accounts of hunts and encounters and strange events, were the world's first education system. Researcher Michael Tomasello has spent his career studying how human children learn compared to other primates. And one of his key findings is that humans are uniquely adapted for what he calls cultural natural learning, absorbing knowledge not through direct experience alone, but through watching, listening, and imitating others. The firelight conversations of your ancestors were the medium through which everything a person needed to know was transmitted, not through books or schools or structured curricula, through story, demonstration, and the slow accumulation of shared attention around a fire. The evenings were long. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner recorded and analyzed fireside conversations among the Kungsan and found a dramatic shift between daytime and nighttime talk. During the day, conversations were practical, about food, logistics, and local events. But after dark, when the fire was lit and the group gathered close, the content shifted almost entirely to narrative. Stories, songs, descriptions of distant places and people, performances. The nighttime was for the imagination, for the part of the human mind that reaches beyond the immediate and asks questions about the world. And here is something remarkable. These evening gatherings were not passive. They were not the ancient equivalent of staring at a screen. They were participatory. Everyone present was an actor and an audience simultaneously. Someone told a story and others responded, added to it, challenged it, laughed at it, turned it into a song. The boundary between performer and watcher did not exist in the way it exists in your living room tonight. This is the context your nervous system was built for, not the isolation of modern work, not the individual performance of a career. The slow pace, the constant social presence, the mixture of effort and rest, the long evenings of shared imagination. This is the environment that shaped your brain over hundreds of thousands of years, which raises an uncomfortable question. If this is what you were built for, what has the last 10,000 years done to you? The transition to agriculture around 10,000 BCE did not free humans. By almost every measurable metric, early farmers worked harder than hunter-gatherers. Their skeletons show more physical stress. Their diets were narrower and less nutritious. Their lives were shorter. What farming created was not leisure. It created surplus. And surplus created hierarchy. And hierarchy created the need to manage and control human time in ways that had never existed before. The clock, in a sense, was invented not to help you, but to organize your labor for someone else's benefit. Bioarchaeologist Kristen Snopkowski has studied the relationship between workload and health across human history and found that the diseases we consider most modern, chronic stress, anxiety, sleep disorders, inflammatory conditions, track closely with the intensification of labor and the reduction of unstructured time. Your body is not malfunctioning. It is responding rationally to an environment it was never designed to inhabit. None of this means you can go back. You cannot. The world you live in is the world you live in, and it has produced things of extraordinary value alongside its costs. But knowing what your ancestors actually did with the day gives you something important. It gives you permission to rest without guilt, to talk without agenda, to sit in the late afternoon and feel your body slow down and know that this is not weakness. It is memory, ancient, cellular, faithful memory. Your brain reaching back across 100,000 years to a rhythm it still recognizes. Tonight, when the demands of the day finally release you and you find yourself drawn toward other people, toward warmth, toward story, know that you are not escaping your life. You are returning to it. You are doing exactly what your ancestors did at the end of every day, in every camp, under every sky, for as long as humans have been human.